Today we're going to discuss the development of Christianity. So this is going to have a major impact on the Roman Empire, obviously. And then before we get into this, we're going to discuss the old Roman state religion, which was basically the Greek religion. And I know we have discussed that. But then we'll get into the origins of Christianity, starting with Jesus and then moving on to, after he dies, some of the other people that kind of carried on the religion. And we'll kind of talk about its impact and that on the Roman Empire as well. So lots to do today. Okay, so the Roman state religion focused on the worship of a number of gods and goddesses. So you have Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, Mars. Those are some examples in the Greek religion. That would be Zeus, Hera, Athena, and Ares. And so obviously that's based on the Greek Olympians. And so the Romans believed that observing the proper rituals are going to bring them into a right relationship with the gods. And so what that means is they basically believed that their job was to make the gods happy, much like the Greeks believed. And they knew that they were doing a good job of that because they had such a large, vast empire. And so that means that the gods favored them. So they were doing a good job. Now they were actually very tolerant of local religions and worship, and so they didn't force newly conquered peoples to adopt their religion like some people will, or some people did. So what they did was they just allowed people to keep their own customs, and that they just had to follow Roman laws. Um, but some Romans were actually drawn to the religions of the East, and that includes Judaism and then eventually Christianity, as we'll discuss, because these religions will give a more spiritual experience to them. They will also promise them entry into a higher reality, and they taught of a life after death that was superior to the present one. So the Romans believed that once you die, you, much like with the Greeks, you go across the river Styx. Okay, so you have to pay the ferryman Charon, and then you go down and you're judged by Minos and Aeneas and Rhadamanthus, and they'll send you one of three places. So you'll either get to go to, if you're good and you're a warrior, you get to go to Elysium. If you're good and you're just a normal person, you can go to Asphodel. Or if you're bad, you go down to Tartarus, and then the Furies torture you until they feel like you've paid your debt to society, basically. So by AD 6, Judea covered the lands of the kingdom of Judah, and this was a Roman province under the direction of a procurator. So a procurator is a treasury officer, but he is a Roman officer. And so unrest was common in Judea because there was different factions of Jews that didn't always get along. They had very different ideas. And so the Sadducees is one. They wanted to cooperate with the Romans. They felt like if you cooperate with them, then they'll leave you alone and everything will be fine. And then you have the Pharisees who wanted to promote Jewish law, not necessarily Roman law, and they wanted to protect that Jewish identity. Then you have the Essenes who basically waited for God to save Israel. They're waiting for a Messiah of some way that God is going to save Israel. And then you have the Zealots who wanted to overthrow the Romans and be independent of Rome totally. So eventually there's going to be a revolt in 66 that will be crushed by the Romans. And then what they're going to do is they're going to destroy the temple that's in Jerusalem. So before that happens, excuse me, Jesus, who was a Jew, he preached of peace. Okay, he had a message of peace. So this was all before that conflict, and he went throughout Judea and Galilee, and he taught that inner transformation was important, not necessarily adhering to laws or rituals. So where like the Roman religion was very much about adhering to rituals, this new idea from Jesus is that you don't need to perform rituals. You just really need to love God, and you need to love each other, and you need to treat everybody as if you love them. And so these virtues will be the basis basically for Western civilization. Okay, so these ideas of humility, charity, and love of others, these are all still things that we teach to this day that are good. Okay, so it's good to be humble, it's good to give to others, and it's good to love others. So his opponents turned him over to the Roman authorities. So Pontius Pilate was the procurator, and basically the idea was that he is going to somehow cause a revolt against Rome. And so Pontius Pilate eventually is going to order him to be crucified. So he was forced to carry his cross up the hill to where he was crucified. And then he is crucified alongside two other men here. But this is Jesus here. And so what they did is crucifixion was a very common way of execution by the Romans. And so what they did was they nailed his hands or his wrists, depending on which version of the Bible you read, to the cross. And then there's like a little piece of wood here that they nailed his feet to as well. And crucifixion was really terrible anyway, because the way you are up on there, it like really stretches your lungs out. So really, what you die of is basically suffocation, and it's a really torturous death in general. So many of his followers believe that he actually overcame death, that he rose again 3 days later after he died. And many believe that he was the Messiah who actually came to save Israel. So the Essenes, which we talked about before, were like, yay, God sent somebody to save us. And he died, but maybe he came back, is what some people believe, which is why that's what the holiday of Easter is based on, is his resurrection. Okay, so Simon Peter, he was a very prominent figure in early Christianity, and he actually became the first pope. Okay, so the pope is the head of the Catholic Church today. He is the Bishop of Rome. Okay, now Simon Peter went to Rome and was preaching basically what Jesus's message, and he was conquered, or he was taken by the Romans, and then he was crucified as well. But he was crucified upside down, which would have been way worse. I don't know if it was worse, but it was definitely terrible. And then another prominent figure was Paul. So Paul took the message of Jesus to both Jews and non-Jews. Non-Jews were known as Gentiles. And most of the New Testament of the Bible is based on Paul's letters to different Christian communities. So there are going to be many Christian communities in Asia Minor and along the Aegean Sea. What was important about Paul was he was actually Saul, and then he had a vision on his way to Damascus, and he basically saw the light, and he became Paul, and he actually ended up, because he was a Roman citizen, he was able to found many Christian communities, and then his letters, like I said, made up much of the New Testament, not all of it. Anyway, so he taught that Jesus was the Savior and the Son of God who had come to earth to save all people. And his death could make up for people's sins and offer them salvation. And so he wrote letters or epistles to the Christian communities. And so there's 13 or 14 books, depending on which version of the New Testament you look at, that are taken from these letters. Excuse me. Oops. Yep, sorry. Okay, so other disciples may have written down Jesus' sayings, and these became known as the Gospels. Okay, so this is the first 4 books of the New Testament are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, and those are the Gospels. These are those 4 guys right here. And then at first, Romans didn't really pay attention to the spread of Christianity. It was very kind of underground, and it was a very small movement at first. But the Christians refused to worship the Roman gods, which eventually they decided was an act of treason. Christians believed in one God, just like the Jews, and worshiping of false gods would endanger their salvation, just like the Jews. So the Old Testament Christians get from the Jews, and part of that is the 10 Commandments, and one of those commandments is you'll have no other gods before me. And then so as a result, they can't worship anybody else. Okay, otherwise they won't get to go to heaven. So Roman persecution of Christians began under Nero's reign, And basically, he blamed the Christians for the fire that burned much of Rome, and he subjected them to very cruel deaths. And this right here is Simon Peter getting crucified upside down. And by the end of his rule, the rule of the five good emperors, Christians made up a very small but very strong minority. And it's this early persecution that really gave the Catholic Church in particular its structure, because they had to be so covert, they had to be highly organized. Okay, and so they were able to kind of make like a hierarchy of people within the religion that kind of spread the word. So Roman persecution strengthened Christianity, like I said, by forcing it to become more organized. So bishops began to control Christian communities, and they created a very distinct difference between the clergy, who are members of the church leaders, and then the laity, who are the everyday church members. Okay, and so it's going to grow very steadily, and there's some really good advantages to Christianity over the Roman religion. So first, it was more personal. Also, it offered a very good life after death, and it fulfilled the human need to belong. So we all want to belong. Okay, humans are very social creatures, and excuse me, Christians formed communities based on love and care, and this was especially attractive to the poor because, yeah, life stinks for you now, but once you die, if you lead a good life, you can gain salvation. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're poor or rich or whatever. Jesus even said it was easier for a camel to fit through a needle than it was for a rich man to go to heaven. So being poor was kind of seen as an advantage in Christianity to get to go to heaven. So this right here is the different Christian communities, and some of these you might recognize, like Jerusalem, obviously, Alexandria, okay. But then when you look, some of these you might, if you're familiar at all with the New Testament, some of these you might know just from the books, Paul's letters to the Corinthians, okay, Paul's letters to the Colossians, to the Ephesians, okay. So all of those are books within the New Testament. So the triumph of Christianity. So emperors in the 3rd century began new waves of persecution, and this will end with the Great Persecution by Diocletian in the 4th century. But Christianity had grown far too strong to destroy it. And so eventually, instead of, it's kind of like if you can't beat them, join them kind of situation, Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, will actually become the first Christian emperor. And in 313, he's going to issue the Edict of Milan that officially sanctions tolerating of Christianity. And then Theodosius the Great will actually make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Okay, and that's all I got for you today. Don't forget to do your processor, and I hope you all have a good day.